You check your garden every day, and somehow it's always demanding something. More water, more weeding, more pest control, more money at the garden center for another product that promises results but delivers more work. You're exhausted. Your weekends have turned into maintenance shifts. And deep down, you're starting to wonder if gardening is even worth it anymore. Here's the reality. Your garden isn't broken because you're doing something wrong. It's broken because modern gardening is built on intervention, not design. You're constantly fighting problems instead of preventing them. Indigenous systems work the opposite way. They designed relationships between plants, soil, microbes, water that created stability without constant human effort. And one technique they used, copper wire placement, amplifies those relationships so dramatically that harvests triple while labor drops. Most people dismiss it as superstition, but it's pure observation-based science. If you're ready to stop being a weekend maintenance worker and start being a garden systems designer, subscribe and let me show you the mechanics that change everything. Here's what most people don't understand about copper. It's not magic. It's not superstition. It's a trace mineral that plays a critical role in soil biology and plant enzyme function. Plants need copper for photosynthesis, for root development, for disease resistance. Soil microbes need copper for electron transfer, for nitrogen cycling, for building the fungal networks that extend root systems. When you place copper wire strategically in your garden, you're not invoking some mystical force. You're providing a trace element that modern agriculture has stripped from most soils. You're activating biological processes that have been dormant. You're turning on systems that indigenous growers kept running for generations through observation and design. Think about it. Indigenous growers didn't have soil test kits. They didn't have university degrees in agronomy. They had something more valuable. They watched what worked. They noticed that certain plants grew better near copper-rich deposits. They observed that copper tools seemed to improve soil over time. They tested these observations across generations and refined techniques that worked reliably. Modern science is finally catching up to what they knew through practice. Soil biologists now understand that copper facilitates electron exchange between microbes. Plant physiologists confirm that copper-dependent enzymes are essential for nitrogen metabolism. Agricultural researchers document how trace copper improves root communication networks through mycorrhizal fungi. But here's the difference between indigenous knowledge and modern application. Indigenous growers didn't use copper in isolation. They used it within polyculture systems where plants supported each other. They combined copper with nitrogen-fixing legumes that fed the soil. They paired it with deep-rooted plants that brought minerals up from subsoil. They integrated it with living mulches that protected soil biology. That integration is what makes copper wire science so powerful. It's not a standalone trick. It's a catalyst that amplifies every relationship you design into your garden. You're not just adding copper, you're activating a system. Now let me show you what this looks like in practice. Start with the Three Sisters system that indigenous growers refined over centuries. Corn provides a vertical trellis. Beans climb the corn while fixing nitrogen in the soil. Squash spreads as living mulch, shading out weeds and retaining moisture. That's the baseline relationship. Three plants working together to create stability. Now add copper wire to this system. Wrap copper wire around the base of your corn stalks or bury a coil 4 to 6 inches deep near the roots. Here's what happens next. The beans fix nitrogen more efficiently because their root nodule bacteria have access to copper for enzyme function. The corn develops stronger root systems because copper-dependent enzymes improve nutrient uptake. The squash produces more vigorously because the soil microbes breaking down organic matter into plant-available nutrients are more active. You're not changing the design, you're amplifying it. The relationships still do the work. Copper just makes those relationships more efficient. This principle scales to any companion planting combination you can imagine. Tomatoes with basil and marigolds, a classic trio where basil repels aphids and marigolds deter nematodes. Add copper wire near the tomato roots. The tomatoes develop stronger disease resistance because copper supports enzyme systems that build plant immunity. The entire system becomes more robust. Cucumbers with radishes and nasturtiums, where radishes break up soil and nasturtiums attract beneficial insects. Place copper coils in the root zone. The cucumbers produce more because their root systems access nutrients more efficiently. The soil biology supporting all three plants becomes more active. This works in containers. This works in raised beds. This works in small urban yards with HOA restrictions. You don't need acres of land. You need to understand the relationships and provide the trace elements that activate them. But here's the reality most garden centers won't tell you. When you shift from intervention gardening to relationship gardening with copper as your catalyst, everything changes. Your watering schedule changes. Instead of daily surface watering that evaporates quickly, you water deeply once or twice a week because copper-enhanced root systems go deeper and access moisture longer. Your fertilizer costs drop. Instead of buying bags of synthetic nitrogen every month, you plant nitrogen-fixing companions and let copper activate the bacteria that make atmospheric nitrogen plant available. Your pest control simplifies. Instead of spraying every time you see an aphid, you design polycultures where beneficial insects maintain balance and copper-supported plants resist stress better. Your weekend labor shifts from maintenance to harvest. Instead of spending hours weeding and troubleshooting problems, you pick food from a system that regulates itself. Think about what that means. Right now, your garden demands daily attention, daily watering, weekly weeding, monthly fertilizing, constant pest monitoring. That's hours every week spent maintaining a system that fights you. This is where most people give up. They're exhausted, they're burned out, and they think gardening is just hard work that never ends. You're not alone in feeling that way. But you've been sold a broken model. Here's what nobody tells you when you're buying another bag of fertilizer or another bottle of pest spray. Indigenous growers designed systems that worked with biological relationships, not against them. They placed copper strategically because they observed it worked. They combined it with nitrogen fixers because they saw those plants enriched soil. They layered crops at different heights because they noticed density suppressed weeds and retained moisture. They weren't guessing. They were observing and refining over generations. You can access that same design logic starting this weekend. Let's address the safety concern directly. Copper toxicity is real, but it requires massive amounts that you won't reach with wire placement. We're talking about trace mineral activation, not copper poisoning. Plants regulate copper uptake through their root systems. They take what they need and leave the rest. Soil microbes use copper in specific enzyme pathways at parts per million concentrations. When you place copper wire in garden beds, you're providing access to a trace element, not flooding the system. Compare that to the actual toxicity of synthetic pesticides you're probably already using. Compare it to the environmental damage from chemical fertilizers that run off into waterways. Copper wire is safer, cheaper, and more aligned with how soil ecosystems actually function. Here's the cost reframe you need. A roll of copper wire costs less than 2 bags of premium fertilizer. That's a one-time investment versus an ongoing monthly expense. Copper wire doesn't degrade quickly. It provides trace mineral access for years. Meanwhile, every bag of fertilizer you buy gets used up in weeks, and you're at the garden center buying more. Every bottle of pesticide runs out, and you're buying another. The intervention model keeps you spending. The relationship model, with copper as your catalyst, front loads a small cost and then works for you season after season. Think about it. Which system actually respects your time and your money? But here's what really matters. Copper works because it activates the biological systems that make gardens self-regulating. Soil microbes need copper for nitrogen cycling. That means your nitrogen-fixing plants become more effective at pulling atmospheric nitrogen and making it plant available. Copper supports the fungal networks that extend root systems and improve drought resistance. That means your plants access water and nutrients from larger soil volumes without additional irrigation. Copper activates enzymes in plants that build disease resistance. That means your crops withstand stress better and require fewer interventions when pests show up. This isn't magic. This is basic soil biology that indigenous growers understood through observation, and that modern science now confirms through research. The self-regulating vision I keep talking about isn't theoretical. It's what happens when you design relationships instead of scheduling interventions. You plant nitrogen fixers alongside heavy feeders. The nitrogen fixers supply what the heavy feeders need. You add copper to activate the bacteria that make that exchange efficient. You plant deep-rooted dynamic accumulators that mine subsoil minerals and drop them as mulch on the surface. Copper helps those plants access and transport minerals more effectively. You layer plants at different heights, tall crops, mid-level bushes, ground covers, so every vertical zone is productive and every plant shades out weeds while retaining moisture. Copper enhances root development, so each layer establishes faster and stronger. Design the relationships, provide the trace elements. The system maintains itself. You stop paying. You stop fighting. You start harvesting. Here's how you begin. Start with one bed or one container. Don't try to transform your entire yard overnight. Pick a manageable space where you can test these principles and see results. Choose a simple polyculture. 3 sisters if you have vertical space, or tomatoes with basil and marigolds if you're working smaller. Get a roll of copper wire. 12 gauge works well, but even 14 gauge is fine. Wrap copper wire around the base of your support stakes, or bury coils 4 to 6 inches deep near root zones. Use about 1 foot of wire per plant. That's your copper catalyst in place. Next, establish your nitrogen fixers. Plant beans, peas, or clover depending on your climate and season. These are your fertility builders. Their root nodules house bacteria that convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available form. Copper activates the enzymes those bacteria use. Your nitrogen fixers feed the system. Your heavy feeders, corn, tomatoes, squash, use what the fixers provide. You're designing a relationship instead of buying bags of nitrogen. Add your living mulch layer. Low-growing plants like clover, thyme, or strawberries spread across soil surface. They shade out weeds. They retain moisture. They provide habitat for ground beetles and spiders that eat pest insects. As they grow and you trim them, they drop nitrogen-rich material that decomposes in place. Copper-enhanced soil microbes break that material down faster, turning it into humus that holds water and nutrients. You're building soil fertility as an embedded process, not an external input. Implement deep watering instead of daily surface watering. Water thoroughly once or twice per week, saturating soil to 8 or 10 inches deep. This encourages roots to go deep where moisture remains longer. Shallow daily watering creates shallow roots that need constant attention. Deep watering with copper-enhanced root development creates drought-tolerant plants that need less intervention. You're designing resilience into the system. Start saving seeds from your strongest plants. Let 1 tomato plant go to seed. Let your basil flower and set seed. Collect those seeds and plant them next season. Over time, you're selecting for plants that thrive in your specific conditions with your specific soil biology. You're creating adapted varieties that require even less intervention, and you're eliminating seed costs entirely. Scale this approach as you see results. One bed becomes two beds. Two beds become four. Your container garden expands to raised beds. Your raised beds expand to in-ground plots. Each expansion follows the same design principles: polycultures over monocultures, relationships over interventions, copper as catalyst, nitrogen fixers for fertility, living mulches for weed suppression, deep watering for resilience, seed saving for adaptation. You're not learning a complicated technique. You're learning a simple framework that repeats at every scale. Here's the time calculation that should motivate you. Another year of daily watering, weekly weeding, monthly fertilizing, and constant pest control. That's roughly 3 to 5 hours per week, every week, for the entire growing season. That's 150 to 250 hours per year maintaining a system that fights you. Or you spend one weekend designing relationships, placing copper, establishing polycultures. You spend 30 minutes twice a week on deep watering and occasional harvest. That's about 50 hours per year on a system that works for you. You're not just saving time, you're reclaiming your weekends. You're turning gardening from a job back into a source of food and satisfaction. You're capable of this shift. You don't need advanced degrees or expensive tools. You need to see the system. Indigenous growers proved this across continents and centuries. They fed communities with minimal intervention because they observed what worked and built on those observations. Modern soil science confirms the mechanisms they used. Copper activates trace mineral pathways. Nitrogen fixers supply fertility. Polycultures create stability. Living mulches suppress weeds and build soil. Deep watering develops resilience. These aren't secrets. These are patterns you can implement starting this weekend. Stop gardening backwards. Stop fighting nature with intervention after intervention. Design the relationships. Place the copper. Establish the companions. Build the system. Your garden will regulate itself. Your harvests will increase. Your labor will decrease. Your time will come back. Start this weekend. Design one bed. Test the principles. Watch what happens when you stop paying and fighting and start designing and harvesting.